Welcome to CB Partners Speaking of Access, the podcast that brings you future-facing insights about U.S. market access trends from an expert panel of healthcare payer stakeholders. I'm Andrew Gould, a senior principal at CB Partners and lead of our U.S. Center of Excellence. I will be joined by three blinded external payer panel members, including Fred, a medical director at a regional MCO, Art, a pharmacy director at a regional MCO that is a subsidiary of a national, and Donald, a pharmacy director at an integrated delivery network. For this topic, we want to talk about management of tumor-agnostic therapies. As of today, there are a few options available on the market, primarily KEYTRUDA and ROZLYTREK, and both of those products are approved for tumor-agnostic indications. ROZLYTREK's a bit of an interesting one. Not only does it have the NTRK indication, but is also indicated for ROS1. And what we'd like to talk about today is primarily how payers are thinking about managing some of these tumor-agnostic therapies as more of them launch in the future.
This is Fred. Again, kind of clinically exciting, and it really has changed the way we have to think about a lot of these products because we no longer tie a product with a specific diagnosis. But having said that, the existing products so far are pretty much prior authorized according to their label and the pivotal trial criteria. The key, of course, being the presence of a companion diagnostic test that has the appropriate result. And so documentation of that is required as part of the prior authorization. And other than that, I would say at least to date, there hasn't been anything particularly different about managing these agents other than simply those prior authorization requirements.
Yeah, it's similar. The management of these products really is no different than kind of how we're managing other oncology products, with the exception of we're not asking for a specific type of cancer, but really more the gene or the mutation that's required to identify for these products.
And for that, identifying the mutation, I know that for some of these products, NextGeneration Sequencing, at least from the physician perspective, was the most accurate approach. Do any of you have updated policies on NextGeneration Sequencing?
Yes, and the test is covered. We don't have I think earlier on, a number of years ago, there was a more controversy around it, but there certainly is a policy. It's fairly clear, and not seeing as much controversy as we used to with that.
Yeah, Donald agrees.
Same here.
Great. One interesting question is, VITRAKVI came out first. Obviously, it priced fairly high, just given the small orphan indication. I think it was around $32,000 a month or something to that effect. ROZLYTREK had the same indication as well as a ROS1 non-small cell lung indication, which was a more prevalent indication. And ROZLYTREK priced at about half of what VITRAKVI was, again pricing closer to the ROS1. From the payer standpoint, you now have VITRAKVI and ROZLYTREK, which both are indicated for an extremely orphan tumor type. One's about half the price of the other. I'm just curious on if any of you has done anything to manage preferentially to ROZLYTREK, just given that it's half the price of VITRAKVI.
We have not. No, they're managed at Parity.
And Art, maybe just some of the rationale for that?
They're both still expensive. We don't have a lot of experience with either product. So I think right now, what we're doing is just kind of seeing how these play out. But for the most part, we manage oncology products in a specialty tier. We don't really have steps. So we're not really preferring one over the other. But I guess if we saw additional utilization of these products, again, they're so small that maybe if we thought that there was a benefit to potentially looking at, quote unquote, preferring one over the other, then I think we probably would, take that into consideration. But right now, it's not a priority for us to try to determine whether one of these should be preferred or not.
And this is Donald. I think Art raises a good point. It's really relatively rare, and we have other things we're focused on. Now, down the road, if we could somehow differentiate this and get the clinicians to agree to use one over the other, so be it. But at the same time, the number of cases that we have with each of these products, it's just, I have to really try to manage things on a higher level. And again, in cancer, this is hard to do. If this was diabetes or respiratory, we could be much more aggressive. I think all of managed care can demonstrate that. But in cancer, it's a much softer call, even though your point, Andrew, is very well taken. Something's twice the cost. We should maybe try to manage it. But it's, again, these are rare indications, rarely used, and we have to focus our efforts on maybe the broader things. Even though I would like to manage it, it's not easy because it's cancer.
Yeah, this is Fred. I agree with everything that's been said. I'd only add that the concern, looking down the road for these drugs is whether they're going to be used in combination, and whether, we discussed earlier, the indications begin to broaden, or the number of cancers for which they're potentially being used, the NTR gene fusion mutated ones, if that field becomes large. But similarly, not a lot of volume on these at the moment, but those are the concerns.
Excellent. And maybe just the final question, we can look to the fourth one here, just about any recommendations for manufacturers that are bringing a tumor-agnostic product to market. Anything from the payer standpoint that you would want to understand, given that it's a tumor-agnostic product, anything in terms of data or any additional information that would be helpful to you?
Fred, I would say the key is really to demonstrate the kind of end-stage situations. And so the product really has to demonstrate that it's got clear efficacy and acceptable toxicity. That's really the main thing we'd look at.
Yes, and I would add, if possible, and again, difficult with rare use, but overall survival is really one of the key metrics for efficacy. There may be other interim metrics that we accept, given that these products come to market typically in an accelerated fashion. But at some point, the manufacturers really have to get back to us around median overall survival, and that these products, at that point, we would say they are clinically valuable. And then if there's a cost difference, we would expect the maybe high-cost manufacturer to attempt to justify that. They may not be able to, but we will certainly ask them, why are they priced twice as high as maybe a competitor that has similar efficacy, but priced half as much?
And this is Art. I mean, I agree with all that too, but I also look downstream. When you're talking about tumor agnostic in a small population, I guess the question is, how likely is that to spread to a much broader population as well, as often happens in oncology?
Excellent. Thanks for listening to this podcast. I would like to thank our respondents today for their participation. This has been CB Partners Speaking of Access.